I've just always loved history. I also come from a family of educators. It was truly about a young girl living in an imaginary world, and I think that definitely changed the trajectory of my life, because prior to that I was doing commercials.
Blackish fans are shocked to discover that everything they thought they knew about Yara Shahidi is only half the story. Behind the headlines and Harvard degrees lies a side of her that's messy, human, and unexpectedly hilarious. How does someone famous since the age of 6 handle failure, family, and fame all at once? For someone who's been on camera most of her life, who is Yara off-screen? Join us as we peel back layers of Yara Shahidi that could change the way you see her forever. Growing among legends. Yara Shahidi's family tree reads less like genealogy and more like the guest list for the most eclectic dinner party imaginable. Yet while growing up, she assumed this was perfectly normal. Her father, Afshin Shahidi, spent nearly 20 years as the personal photographer of the late pop icon Prince. That meant late-night studio sessions, world tours, and a life orbiting one of the most enigmatic musicians on the planet. While her father documented the artist, young Yara wandered the backstage corridors of Paisley Park, playing while cameras clicked and music history quietly unfolded around her. Family holidays looked a little unusual too. Trips to places like Hawaii and London sometimes included Prince himself. For Yara, none of it seemed extraordinary at the time. "He was such a piece of my life that I didn't question it," she later said. But the relationship ran deeper than closeness. When Yara made her film debut at 9 years old in Imagine That, starring opposite Eddie Murphy, Prince didn't simply send congratulations. He rented out an entire theater so people around him could watch the movie. He even kept copies to give to collaborators. Years later, after Blackish became a cultural phenomenon, Prince reached out again, this time through social media. He sent a message saying how proud he was and mentioned that Zoe, Yara's character, was his favorite. Even after Prince's passing, their connection left behind a small but telling artifact. Somewhere inside Paisley Park sits a photograph of 7-year-old Yara signed, "To Mr. Prince, Heart Yara." She didn't even know it was there until after his passing, when visitors to the museum began sending her photos of it. Seeing the frame for the first time as an adult was surreal. "You can see my father in my eyes," she said. "You can see my backyard." And that backyard, it turns out, was full of legends wearing flip-flops. Prince was only the beginning. Yara's second cousin is the legendary rapper Nas. The relationship wasn't just a distant technicality on a family tree either. In 2005, when Nas married Kelly's, Yara served as the flower girl at their wedding. Years later, when she walked the Emmys red carpet in 2021, someone asked what she had been listening to while getting ready. Her answer was casual, almost offhand. "Today was Duckworth, my cousin. Nas, of course." But the family tree keeps branching in directions few people would expect.
Today was Duckworth?
Yes.
My cousin Nas, of course.
Her first cousin once removed is Anousheh Ansari, the first Iranian-American astronaut and the first female private space explorer. While most children looked up at the night sky and wondered what it might be like to leave Earth, Yara grew up knowing someone who had actually done it. "My Iranian relatives have reaffirmed the idea that the sky is the limit," she once said. But in fact, my cousin proved that the sky isn't even the limit because she went to space. Moments like that help explain something fundamental about Yara Shahidi's worldview. Growing up around artists, activists, and explorers meant possibility never felt abstract. It was simply part of everyday life. With her kind of childhood, what sort of person did Yara grow up to be? Yara was a bookworm. Yara's academic story didn't start in school. It began at home, right under her mother's nose. Her mother, Carrie, ran what could only be described as an intentional household. The television was rarely the center of attention, but the bookshelves always were. And from an early age, Yara was encouraged to approach ideas the way other children approached games, by exploring them from every possible angle. While most kids were watching Saturday morning cartoons, Yara was reading different versions of the same story: Korean Cinderella, Persian Cinderella, Egyptian Cinderella. The point wasn't simply to finish the stories. Her parents wanted her to notice something deeper, that narratives change depending on who is telling them, and that understanding the world requires seeing the same idea through more than one lens. It was a subtle lesson about perspective, but it stuck. By the time she was 6, she had already worked through the history material available at her school. But instead of celebrating the milestone and leaving it there, her mother handed her something far more ambitious: a supplementary curriculum that began with Mesopotamian civilization. If one was going to understand the present, the logic seemed to be that one might as well start where the story of civilization begins. However, for Yara, it didn't feel like pressure at all. She quickly became the kind of reader who moved through books the way some people move through cities, wandering wherever curiosity took her. Dystopian fiction, essays, political theory, biographies, anything that helped explain how societies functioned and why power moved the way it did. Reading became a way of mapping the world, and by 13, one of the voices guiding that map belonged to James Baldwin. Baldwin's writing arrived at exactly the moment when the questions he asked about identity, justice, power, and belonging were beginning to matter on a personal level. Soon he was joined by writers like Zora Neale Hurston and others whose work made it clear that literature could function as both storytelling and social analysis. But to Yara, those ideas were never abstract. Her grandfather had been a member of the Black Panther Party, which meant that many of the political tensions Baldwin wrote about weren't distant historical events. They were conversations that lived somewhere in the family's own history. The books she read weren't introducing entirely new questions, so much as giving language to ones she was already learning to ask. At the same time, another discipline was quietly shaping her in a completely different way. Martial arts had entered her life when she was 7 years old, and by the time she appeared on Fuse's White Guy talk show in 2015, she mentioned almost casually that she held a black belt. When the host seemed skeptical, she demonstrated a few moves on camera, confirming that the claim was very real. What viewers saw in that moment was years of practice compressed into a few seconds. A black belt requires repetition, patience, and the ability to keep showing up even when progress feels invisible. It's the kind of discipline that builds slowly over time, long before anyone is paying attention. For Yara, those years of training formed a quiet parallel to the intellectual habits she was developing through reading and study. Both required the same thing: consistency. Looking back, that mindset began to show up in places most people wouldn't expect, including the way she thought about something as simple as a tattoo. When Yara turned 18, she chose to get her first one, but instead of a symbol or image, she opted for 2 small numbers placed discreetly above her elbow. 6-3. The numbers refer to 1963, a year that reshaped American history in multiple ways. The March on Washington, the Birmingham church bombing, and the publication of James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time, a book that had already altered the way she thought about race, justice, and responsibility.
Apostrophe 63 for the pivotal year in the civil rights movement. It's, of course, the March on Washington.
Later, she added 2 more tattoos, each equally subtle: a Farsi word meaning soul on her wrist and a tiny location pin on her ankle. None of them was larger than a dime, and each could easily go unnoticed. But that was the point. They weren't meant to announce anything to the world. They were reminders of the ideas and identities that mattered most to her. Taken individually, these details might seem unrelated, but together, they reveal that Yara Shahidi wasn't drifting through adolescence, waiting to discover who she was supposed to become. She was building herself in all aspects, long before most people began thinking about those questions. Which makes what happened next feel far less surprising, because by the time college application season arrived, the real question wasn't whether Yara Shahidi would get into a good school. It was something far more interesting: how many of them would say yes? An unusual kind of problem. The day Yara graduated from Harvard, Instagram broke, but 5 years before then, back in 2017, 17-year-old Yara Shahidi found herself facing a decision most students never encounter. Every college she applied to accepted her. Stanford, Yale, Spelman, Harvard, each institution responded with the same answer, turning what is normally an anxious waiting period into an entirely different problem: choosing where the next phase of her life would unfold. But what does one expect when their recommendation letter is written by Michelle Obama? The former First Lady had come to know Yara through their shared work on girls' education initiatives, and when the time came to support her application, the endorsement arrived with the weight of someone who had watched her work up close.
Because I'm interested in
I
humans.
was a sociology major.
Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
write my recommendation letter, please.
You got it.
Even so, college had never been a spontaneous decision for Yara. She had been talking about it since she was 4 years old, long before acceptance letters or recommendations were part of the conversation, and by the time she reached 17, she already knew what she hoped to study and why it mattered. But rather than rushing directly to campus, Yara made a deliberate decision to defer for a year. Grownish was about to premiere, and she wanted time to settle into the responsibility of representing her generation through a show that would place her at the center of cultural conversations about identity, education, and young adulthood. As she explained to Essence at the time, she wanted the space to do her best on the series while also growing into herself a little more before stepping into the academic environment she had planned for so long. When she finally arrived in Cambridge in 2018, the reality of Harvard proved slightly different from what outsiders might have expected. Many people assumed that a recognizable television actress walking onto a prestigious campus would instantly become the kind of student whose presence turns heads in lecture halls and dining halls alike. But Yara discovered fairly quickly that Harvard's social life operated differently. In her freshman year, students who recognized her often pretended not to. Others seemed unsure whether the person standing beside them in line for coffee could actually be the same individual they had seen on television. At times, the reactions bordered on comedy. She remembered on one occasion, she walked into the CVS near campus and immediately noticed her own face staring back at her from the magazine rack, printed across the cover of Cosmopolitan. Students browsing nearby would glance at the magazine, glance at Yara, and then quietly dismiss the possibility that the two images could belong to the same person. Even the process of assigning roommates produced its own small moment of comedy. When Harvard asked about her living preferences, Yara decided to describe her habits with complete honesty. She wakes up early, usually around 6 in the morning. She likes to listen to podcasts during that time, and she has very little patience for interruptions during that ritual. The description painted such an unappealing picture of communal living that the housing office resolved the issue immediately by placing her in a single room, a decision she later joked had been exactly what she intended all along. But the arrangement did not include any special treatment. Harvard had no interest in transforming her college experience into a celebrity accommodation program, and Yara herself insisted that it remain as ordinary as possible. In her words, she was simply an actor living in a dorm like everyone else. For her coursework, Yara chose a dual concentration spanning social studies and African American studies, focusing particularly on Black political thought within a neo-colonial framework. The material demanded sustained attention and intellectual rigor, the kind of work that required long hours of reading, discussion, and writing, even for students who had far fewer outside commitments. And yet outside commitments were exactly what Yara had. While maintaining a full academic schedule, she continued filming Grownish, producing projects, and attending events connected to her work in the entertainment industry. One moment from 2021 captured that balancing act perfectly. After attending the Emmy Awards in a striking green Dior gown, where she even stepped on stage to present an award, she left before the ceremony had fully concluded, boarded a flight back to Massachusetts, and arrived in time for her classes the next morning. In May 2022, that chapter finally concluded when Yara walked across the stage to receive her degree. She later posted a photo of herself wearing a custom Dior suit beneath her cap and gown, smiling broadly, as if fully aware of the unusual path that had brought her there. The caption she chose was almost playfully simple: Yara, noun, a Harvard graduate. Among the many congratulatory messages that followed, one comment quickly captured public attention and sent Instagram into a frenzy. Michelle Obama, whose letter had supported Yara's application years earlier, wrote that she was proud of the example Yara had set and the accomplishment she had achieved. But after spending so much of her life mastering systems, school schedules, film sets, research projects, the structure suddenly disappeared, leaving behind a question that was far less straightforward than it first appeared. What happens when someone who has spent years proving she can excel inside every framework she enters finally steps into a decade that comes with no syllabus at all. Learning to be mediocre. Most people spend their 20s acting as if they have everything figured out. Yara Shahidi spent hers admitting that she did not. In March 2025, she spoke at Johns Hopkins University to students and alumni, expecting the usual celebrity platitudes: follow your dreams, believe in yourself, aim high. Instead, she offered a different perspective. My 20s have been a jarring experiment in figuring out how to give myself space to be mediocre at things. She explained that she had an unreasonable expectation to excel immediately, and that striving for perfection in every endeavor was an ineffective way to discover new paths. This was someone who had graduated from Harvard,
Blackish star Yara Shahidi announces that she will attend Harvard and she is being educated.
launched a production company at 23, and acted professionally since the age of 6. Despite her achievements, she recognized the exhaustion that accompanied the pressure to perform flawlessly and the necessity of allowing herself to be an amateur. One of the biggest exercises in curiosity has been the first step of self-work, acknowledging when I am not skilled and permitting myself to be an amateur without expectation of mastery, she once said. This philosophy was tested in August 2025, when Yara entered the baking tent for the Great American Baking Show Celebrity Edition. Unlike a scripted set, this environment allowed no retakes. The challenge required adapting to ovens, cameras, and a clock that did not pause for mistakes. She had pursued the opportunity not out of confidence, but because it provided a space to experiment. Her first task, a summer cupcake, drew on her cultural roots. She incorporated flavors from her Black and Iranian heritage, along with morning tea rituals inherited from her family. The result was subtle, personal, and successful. The final challenge, however, required crafting a self-portrait cookie. The assignment, transforming her own face into cookie form, proved disastrous. Yara described the result as horrendous and very abstract. While many would have succumbed to embarrassment, she laughed, embracing the weirdness and recognizing that failure in public could also be freeing. By participating fully, Yara demonstrated the principle of engaging without needing to succeed. The cookie was imperfect, but the experience itself held value. Even in smaller, private moments, this mindset persisted. During the height of her thesis, she subsisted on miso paste, hot water, and spinach, ordinary sustenance that reflected her commitment to authenticity over presentation. Throughout her 20s, she has treated life as a series of deliberate experiments in curiosity, humility, and self-awareness. She now regularly asks herself a question offered by a friend during a moment of hesitation. Do you not agree with this decision because you truly feel that way, or because it breaks narrative with who you think you are? This question separates personal desire from external expectation and allows her to engage fully with experiences, whether a timed baking challenge, her academic pursuits, or her evolving career. If Yara could embrace imperfection in such public and personal contexts, how does the same philosophy inform the way she shapes her professional life and takes ownership of her career? A mother and child partnership. Acting is a job where someone else holds the reins. Performers show up when called, wear the wardrobe provided, speak lines written for them, and hope for an invitation to return. It can be exhilarating, but Yara Shahidi decided early she did not want to remain a guest in someone else's house. She wanted to hold the keys. In 2019, at 19 years old, and in the midst of her starring role on Grownish, Yara and her mother launched Seventh Son Productions.
Seventh Son Productions start. Was there a lack of something you were seeing?
A move most actors do not make until decades into their careers, and they signed a multi-year producing deal with ABC Signature, the very studio behind the shows that had propelled Yara into the public eye. In Persian culture, the seventh day after a child's birth is celebrated as a gathering of family and community. For Yara and Carrie, the name became a metaphor for the kind of storytelling they wanted to champion, stories that bring people together and create space for meaningful engagement. By 2022, Seventh Son Productions had expanded its influence when ABC Signature incorporated the company into the Onyx Collective, Disney's initiative to elevate creators of color. Alongside established voices like Ryan Coogler, Destin Daniel Cretton, and Prentice Penny, Yara and Carrie became part of a creative ecosystem that emphasized both excellence and access. While managing these responsibilities, Yara continued her work on Grownish, not just as the lead actress, but as an executive producer on 89 episodes, a role that placed her squarely in the creative decision-making process. She attended writers' meetings, participated in casting sessions, and observed editing decisions, all while delivering her performances on set. She was learning how it all worked from the inside and understanding the interplay between creative vision and final execution. One illustrative example occurred during a 2022 writers' meeting, when Yara persistently suggested bringing her on-screen brother Junior, played by Marcus Scribner, into a new storyline. She pushed the idea casually at first and then with increasing insistence, framing it in terms of narrative impact rather than personal preference. Her advocacy reflected the mindset of a producer rather than an actor, a focus on the project as a whole, the cohesion of the story, and the opportunities for other talent to shine. By 2024, Seventh Son had expanded into audio projects, launching the Optimus Project in partnership with SiriusXM. The venture aligned with Yara and Carrie's upbringing in a household where podcasts, audiobooks, and radio were central rather than television. The weekly show featured conversations with artists, activists, and thinkers about creativity, resilience, and optimism. Its debut episode featured Yara Shahidi, completing a symbolic circle of family and mentorship. Beyond television and audio, Yara's production slate grew to include feature films such as Sitting in Bars with Cake,
First choice, I do Saint Germain.
a romantic comedy drama addressing friendship and cancer support, as well as upcoming projects like Ballerina Overdrive and The Beekeeper 2, both under her production oversight. Even her appearance in Gucci's Spring/Summer 2025 campaign, directed by Gus Van Sant, was executed through her own company. Through every step, it is obvious that Yara is not collecting credits, but building infrastructure. She and Carrie have made it clear that their goal has always been foundational: to create opportunities for voices that might otherwise be excluded, to be the architects of the stories they value, and to maintain agency over their own careers. Being the actor may allow access, but being the producer gives ownership. Yara has been buying real estate in the entertainment industry since she was a teenager. If Yara can take control of her career and shape the stories she tells on screen, who does she tell the stories she lives off-screen? The stories she tells at home. Yara Shahidi wasn't just close to her mother, Carrie. She was even tighter with her younger brothers, Ahsan and Saeed. They grew up in the same Minnesota household, surrounded by cameras, scripts, and the unusual rhythms of a family steeped in creativity. Ahsan and Saeed, both actors themselves, had walked the red carpet and learned the strange etiquette of an industry that often treats young performers as commodities. On paper, they were colleagues. In practice, they were something else entirely. While Yara has been famous since age 6, being observed by strangers is one thing. Being watched by brothers is another. She has spent most of her life analyzed, critiqued, and written about. But with Ahsan and Saeed, there is honesty, unfiltered and relentless. Their commentary is sharp, sometimes brutal, yet it comes with the warmth of familiarity and love. In April 2024, during a conversation with People magazine about dating, Yara revealed a glimpse of this dynamic. Ahsan and Saeed, she said, their commentary on my dating life is just, I think that is what keeps me going outside, just to give them stories. It was not romance, nor the search for connection, that motivated her. The incentive was laughter, the delight of sharing experiences with the people who knew her longest. The success of an evening, a date, a misadventure was measured in how hard her brothers laughed afterwards. Growing up in a family where privacy was scarce, Yara cultivated a space with her siblings that required no performance. There were no cameras, no articles, no social expectations, just shared jokes, references, and memories that belonged only to them. Ahsan and Saeed understood the pressures she faced, the recognition, the scrutiny, the constant expectation to perform. And yet, most of the time, their response was teasing. Merciless, funny, human teasing that grounded her even as the world around her demanded poise. This version of Yara, sister first, celebrity second, is the one absent from profile pieces, alumni spotlights, and red carpet features. It is smaller and profoundly human. The bond between them shapes how she moves through the world, When failures can be transformed into comedy and successes into inside jokes, the pressure to perform for strangers diminishes. She doesn't need the public's approval. She has her audience at home. She has laughter. She has a connection. She has the people who have always known her. That intimacy with her brothers reveals something essential about Yara Shahidi. Despite Harvard, executive producing credits, activism, and campaigns for global brands, she is still the sister who goes on terrible dates to give her brothers stories to laugh at. What do you think is next for Yara as she continues to balance fame, creativity, and purpose? Which of her choices so far has been the most surprising to you, and how do you think it will influence what she does next? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.